One morning, on my way to my son's high-rise law office in downtown Manhattan, I helped a disheveled, frail older man on the crowded public bus who was being aggressively harassed by a group of loud teenagers. When we both got off the bus at the same stop, he followed me down the sidewalk and asked if he could tag along with me just to see the impressive inside of the building. I agreed out of pure pity, thinking he was just a lonely, completely forgotten soul. When we arrived, the moment my son saw him, his face went completely pale. He screamed at security to throw the old beggar out, not realizing that the man in the tattered coat was the one person who could end his career with a single phone call. That old man was Heir, the billionaire founder of the firm, and my son had just made the biggest mistake of his life. My name is Leonard Baxter, 67 years old, and this is how I took down my own family. Before I continue this story, let me know in the comments below where you are watching from. Hit like and subscribe if you believe that respect is earned by character, not by a paycheck. The number Q44 select bus service was packed tight to the doors that Tuesday morning, the air thick and smelling of wet wool coats, damp umbrellas, diesel fumes, and stale convenience store coffee. I stood near the back exit, holding onto the cold, grease-stained metal pole, my knuckles turning white with every sharp, aggressive turn the driver took through the heavy Queens traffic. It was a cold, rainy morning, and everyone on the bus was retreating into their own silent worlds, staring down at their glowing phone screens. I was a Local 3 union master electrician for 40 years. I had spent my entire adult life climbing high-altitude steel beams in the freezing wind, bending thick galvanized steel conduit with my bare hands, running heavy high-voltage copper lines through dark utility shafts, and installing the complex electrical backbones of half the skyscrapers these business executives were currently staring at on their smartphones. I had worked on the construction of the World Financial Center, the renovation of the Chrysler Building's iconic spire, and the massive substations beneath Grand Central Terminal. I knew the bones, the veins, the wiring, and the pulse of this city because I had helped build them block by block. I had survived electrical arcs, falls from scaffolding, and winters so cold my fingers would freeze to the metal conduit. I had earned my pension, I had earned my retirement, and I had earned my pride through honest, back-breaking labor. But today, standing in my worn canvas jacket amongst the silent, well-dressed commuters, I felt small, outdated, and completely invisible to the morning rush-hour crowd. My son, Connor, had summoned me to his office like a naughty schoolboy who had been caught misbehaving. "Be there at 9 sharp, Dad, and do not wear those work boots," he had texted me the night before. I looked down at my boots. They were clean, polished with black wax, but they were work boots. They were heavy, steel-toed, and had thick rubber soles. They were all I had. They were the shoes that paid for Connor's private school, his undergraduate tuition, and his expensive law degree. I was not going to apologize for wearing the foundation of his success. The bus lurched forward suddenly, with a loud hiss of its air brakes, throwing several standing passengers off balance as the driver accelerated aggressively into the morning traffic on Main Street. In the priority seating area, near the front, which was clearly marked for the elderly and disabled, a group of 3 high school teenagers was laughing loudly, playing rap music directly from a phone speaker, and taking up 4 seats with their backpacks. One of them, a kid of about 17, with a shaved head, a bright red designer puffer jacket, and a sneer aimed at the world, kicked out his leg, deliberately tripping an older man who was trying to navigate his way down the crowded aisle. The old man stumbled forward, gasping in surprise, and his worn wooden cane went clattering loudly onto the dirty, wet floor of the bus, sliding under a seat. He looked incredibly frail, dressed in a long, tattered gray coat that had seen better days, and a flat cap pulled low over his eyes. He clutched the back of a plastic seat to keep from hitting the floor, his knuckles trembling from the sudden shock. "Oops, watch your step, Grandpa," the kid laughed, high-fiving his friend in the seat next to him. "Maybe you should stay in the museum where you belong. You're blocking the aisle with that old stick." The old man tried to bend down, to retrieve his wooden cane from the dirty floor, but the bus hit a deep, jarring pothole, and he nearly fell over, completely clutching the steel seat back with his trembling fingers to support his weight. No one in the crowded bus moved to help him. The business executives in their tailored wool jackets looked down at their phones. The mothers with their children stared out the window. The younger passengers pretended to sleep. The cold, suffocating indifference in that crowded space was heavy, a reflection of a society that had forgotten how to respect its elders. The teenager in the puffer jacket turned to his friends, laughing again, and said, "Look at these old dinosaurs. They're so slow they should be in a museum." The old man adjusted his cap, sighed, and murmured, "It's fine, son. Don't worry about it. I'm used to it." "No, it's not fine," I said, my voice rising. "If we let them treat us like garbage on the bus, then we're already dead." We built the roads they're riding on. It was the exact same look my son Connor had started giving me over the last few years, whenever I talked about my work or the old days on the construction sites. That look that said, "You have expired, Dad. You just don't know it yet." I pushed off the metal pole. My knees popped a sharp reminder of 4 decades spent climbing ladders and crawling through crawl spaces. But I moved with the speed and purpose of a man who used to break up bar fights on Friday nights in Queens. I shoved past a businessman in a gray suit and grabbed the wooden cane off the floor. I held it out to the old man, steadying him by the elbow with my other hand. "Here you go, friend," I said, my voice gravelly. The old man looked up at me. His eyes were sharp, surprisingly blue, clear and intelligent amidst the deep wrinkles of his face. "Thank you," he murmured. I turned to the teenager who had tripped him. "Get up," I said. The kid blinked, looking me up and down, sizing up my faded jacket and my work boots. "What?" I said. "Get up," I repeated, my voice louder this time, cutting through the low hum of the diesel engine. "You seize this man. He has 50 years on you. You trip him, you laugh, and now you sit there while he stands. Move, or I will move you." I might be 67 years old and my joints might ache in the rain, but my forearms and wrists are still thick and strong from decades of bending heavy steel conduit, carrying iron pipes and pulling heavy copper cables through concrete shafts. The kid saw the calluses on my hands, the steady width of my shoulders, and the look in my eyes, the look of an old-school New York worker who had worked hard all his life, fought for his union, and had absolutely nothing left to fear from a schoolyard bully in a puffer jacket. His friends, who had been laughing loudly just seconds ago, went quiet, nudging each other and looking away. "Yo, Marcus, just chill. It's not worth it," one of them whispered, pulling at his sleeve. He scoffed, trying to save face in front of his buddies by rolling his eyes and muttering a curse under his breath, but he slowly slid out of the seat and stood in the aisle. "Sit down, sir," I told the old man, offering him a steady hand to guide him into the seat. He sat down, arranging the folds of his long gray coat with a strange, quiet sort of dignity that felt out of place on a crowded city bus. I stood in front of him, holding the overhead bar with both hands, physically blocking the teenagers from his view and acting as a human shield. I stared them down in silence, the weight of my gaze keeping them quiet and uncomfortable, until their stop finally came up near the high school, and they shuffled out of the rear doors, muttering curses and insults under their breath into the wet morning air. The bus rattled on toward the high-rise district of Manhattan. The old man tapped my arm gently. "You did not have to do that, friend," he said. "I have dealt with worse than schoolyard bullies in my life." "I know," I replied, staring out the window at the steel bridges passing by. But I was not going to watch it happen, not today. He studied me for a moment, his blue eyes assessing my face. "You seem angry, friend, heading to a funeral." "Worse," I said, letting out a dry laugh. "I am heading to see my son. He is a lawyer, big shot, corner office. He thinks he owns the world because he wears a $3.00 suit and drives a German sports car." "Lawyers," the old man chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "A necessary evil, why the long face?" "Is he suing you?" "No, he's not suing me," I snorted, shaking my head with a bitter chuckle. "He wants something. My son Connor always wants something, and he only calls me when there's a transaction involved. Today, he summoned me to his office, demanding that I sign a set of legal papers he prepared. He wants me to sell my row house in Queens, the very home where we raised him. It is the only asset I have left in this world since my beloved wife, Patricia, passed away 3 years ago. Connor tells me that the neighborhood is going downhill, that the stairs are too steep for my old knees, and that I'm getting too old to manage the property alone. But I know the truth. He doesn't care about my safety or my knees. He just needs the cash equity from the house sale to cover his own financial debts and maintain his wealthy lifestyle. He drives a brand new German sports car and lives in a luxury apartment, and yet he calls his retired father asking for $500 to pay his electric bill. The greed is eating him alive, and he doesn't even see it. The old man nodded slowly, his eyes reflecting a deep, familiar sadness as he tapped his fingers on the silver head of his cane. "Children often forget who built the very ground they stand on, Leonard," he said softly. "They look at our wrinkles, our slow steps, and our old clothes, and they assume we have nothing left to offer the world. They don't realize that the strength they used to look down on us was inherited from our own sacrifices. I raised 3 children, Leonard. I gave them everything: estates, trust funds, elite educations. And now, they only call me when they want to check if my will has been updated, or to ask for a loan to buy a summer house in the Hamptons. My car broke down this morning, a Rolls-Royce Phantom. Can you believe it? The finest automotive engineering in the world, and it dies on the corner of 3rd Avenue because of a faulty alternator. My chauffeur, Jenkins, wanted to call a private transport service immediately, but I told him to go with the tow truck. I decided to just take the bus to see how the other half lives, to touch the reality of this city again. And it has been a highly educational morning. I looked at him, a Rolls-Royce, sure, and I was the King of England. He looked like he hadn't bought a new coat since the Reagan administration, but I didn't say anything. We were just 2 old men discarded by the morning rush, finding a moment of connection on a crowded bus. "Where are you headed?" I asked, as the bus began to slow down near the financial district. "Downtown," the old man said. "Same as you, I suspect. Mind if I walk with you?" I left my wallet and my phone in the car when the tow truck took it, and I do not want to argue with the security guards at these fancy buildings. I hesitated. Connor had texted me to be discreet, to come in through the back way, so his colleagues wouldn't see his blue-collar father. Walking in with a stranger who looked like a vagrant was the exact opposite of discreet. But I looked at this man, his hands shaking slightly on his cane, and I saw myself. I saw an older man who deserved respect. "Come on," I said as the bus hissed to a halt. "Stick with me. I am Leonard Atakis," the man said, shaking my hand. His grip was surprisingly firm and dry. We got off the bus at the downtown station, and the loud, chaotic city noise hit us like a sudden physical blow. Honking car horns, distant sirens, the rumble of the subway beneath the street, and the aggressive, hurried energy of thousands of Manhattan commuters rushing to their office cubicles. The cold rain was turning into a steady mist that clung to the steel and stone of the buildings. We walked 2 blocks together, navigating the crowded sidewalks, until we stood in front of the Heir and Partners building. It was a massive glass and steel monolith piercing the low-hanging clouds, cold, imposing, and gleaming like a knife in the gray morning light. This was the cathedral of corporate law where my son worked, a place of billable hours and high-stakes mergers. Everyone was whispering. This was the building where he had spent 5 years learning to forget the simple neighborhood in Queens where he came from, and the father who had paid for his journey here. We reached the heavy revolving glass doors of the massive skyscraper. I stepped forward into the heated, high-ceilinged lobby, but a security guard, a massive man with a headset, a tactical belt, and a black uniform that read Monolith Security, stepped directly into my path, holding out a flat palm. "Delivery entrance is around the back of the building on the service street," he said, his voice flat, mechanical, and devoid of any respect. He didn't even look me in the eye, instead staring at the clipboard in his hand. "I am not a delivery," I said, straightening my spine, my voice deep and firm from years of shouting over the noise of construction sites. "I am Leonard Baxter. I am here to see Connor Baxter on the executive floor." He is expecting me for a meeting. The guard paused, slowly lowering his clipboard, and looked me up and down. He took in the sight of my scuffed work boots, my faded jeans, and my worn flannel jacket. Then he looked at Atticus standing beside me, who was leaning heavily on his cane, looking even more disheveled in his tattered coat and flat cap. To the security guard, we looked like two vagrants who had wandered in from the street to escape the cold drizzle. "Mr. Baxter is a senior associate," the guard said skeptically. "He didn't mention any visitors, especially not you. Please step aside." "Call him," I said, my voice rising. "Tell him his father is here." The guard sighed, annoyed, and tapped his earpiece, muttering into his radio. While he did, I turned to Atticus. "Sorry about this. My son is particular about his image." Atticus was looking up at the vaulted glass ceiling of the lobby, staring at the massive crystal chandelier. "It is a bit gaudy, isn't it?" he mused. "I always told them the Italian marble was too slippery when it rains." Before I could ask what he meant by that, the elevator doors dinged, and Connor came striding across the lobby. He looked sharp. I had to give him that. His navy suit was tailored perfectly, his hair combed back, walking with the confidence of a man who had never had to scrub grease or dirt from his fingernails. But the moment he saw me, his face twisted in embarrassment. He didn't hug me. He didn't say hello. He marched right up to us, his heels clicking sharply on the polished marble floor, and hissed in a low, furious whisper, "Dad, what the hell are you doing here?" "I explicitly told you to use the service entrance around the back of the building. Do you know who walks through this lobby every morning? We have major corporate clients, managing directors from Goldman Sachs, and partners from the biggest hedge funds in the city walking through these doors. And you are standing here in the middle of the lobby, looking like you just walked off a dirty construction site, wearing those ridiculous work boots. You are going to ruin my reputation." "I built sites like this, Connor, with my own hands," I said, my voice low and steady as I fought the powerful urge to slap him across his manicured face. "And this is the front door of the building. I am your father, not your dirty, embarrassing secret. I walked through the front doors of the skyscrapers. I wired, and I am walking through the front door of your office." Connor rolled his eyes, checking his Rolex. "We do not have time for your blue-collar pride today, Dad. Megan is waiting upstairs in the boardroom. We need those signatures before lunch." Then, he noticed Atticus standing quietly next to me, leaning on his cane. "Who is this?" Connor asked, pointing a manicured finger at the old man. "Did you pick up a homeless person on the way here, Dad?" "Jesus Christ, this is a law firm, not a shelter." "He is a friend," I said, stepping between them. "He helped me find the place. He is a bum." Connor spat, turning to the security guard who was watching the scene. "Get this trash out of here now, and Dad, get in the elevator. We are going up." The guard stepped toward Atticus, reaching for his shoulder. "Sir, you need to leave." Atticus didn't move. He didn't look at the guard. He looked straight at Connor. His blue eyes, which had been warm on the bus, were now like chips of ice. "I am with him," Atticus said, his voice low, but cutting through the lobby noise with strange authority. "If he goes up, I go up." Connor laughed, a cruel, barking sound. "You have got to be kidding me. You think you can just walk into Heir and Partners because you tagged along with another old man? This isn't a soup kitchen. Get out before I have you arrested for trespassing." I grabbed Connor's arm, my grip tight enough to make him wince. "Stop it. He is coming with me. If he stays down here, I leave, and you don't get a single signature today." Connor froze. He looked at me, then at Atticus, then back at me. I could see the desperate calculations turning in his head. He needed the equity from my house. He was in deep financial trouble, though he tried to hide it under his expensive suit. He couldn't risk me walking away. "Fine," he snarled, pulling his arm away from my grip. "Fine, bring him up, but he sits in the corner and keeps his mouth shut. If he smells up the boardroom, I'm taking it out of your monthly allowance." I didn't have a monthly allowance. I lived off my union pension. But Connor liked to pretend to the world that he supported his poor father. It made him feel important. We rode the private glass elevator in complete, suffocating silence. The lift was an express elevator, climbing the outer wall of the skyscraper, offering a panoramic, dizzying view of the Manhattan skyline. As the buildings below shrank and the taxicabs on the street began to look like tiny yellow ants moving through a canyon of concrete and glass. Connor stood at the front of the elevator, refusing to look at me or at Takus. He was nervously adjusting his tie, checking his gold Rolex every 10 seconds, and typing furiously on his smartphone, probably warning Megan that I had brought a homeless man to the meeting. His breathing was shallow, and I could see small beads of sweat forming on his temples, a telltale sign of the pressure he was under. Takus stood in the back of the elevator, leaning on his cane, his eyes reflecting the gray clouds of the New York sky as the elevator climbed. He was silent, but his face had the calm, analytical look of a judge waiting to deliver a verdict. The elevator chimed softly as the floor numbers ticked up, 30, 40, 50, 60. My ears popped from the rapid change in pressure, the silent hum of the motor, the only sound in the glass chamber. The elevator doors glided open, and we were ushered into a massive conference room that looked like it belonged to a movie set. The room featured floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire Manhattan skyline, a long conference table made of a single piece of polished mahogany, and plush leather chairs. Sitting at the far end of the massive table was Megan, my daughter-in-law. She was dressed in an expensive designer outfit, wearing a large diamond necklace and tapping her long, manicured fingernails against a thick stack of legal documents. Megan was the daughter of a wealthy real estate developer from Long Island, and she had spent her entire life looking down on anyone who worked with their hands. She had pushed Connor to buy a home they couldn't afford in Westchester, to lease a Porsche, and to live a lifestyle that far exceeded his salary as an associate. She did not stand up to greet me. She did not offer a smile. When she saw me and Takus walk into the room, her nose wrinkled in immediate disgust, as if we were bringing a foul, industrial smell into the pristine boardroom. "Connor," Megan said, her voice sharp and cold, not even acknowledging my presence. "You said it would just be your father. Who is this dirty scarecrow you brought with you? Why is he in the boardroom?" "Just ignore him, Megan," Connor muttered, tossing his leather folder onto the table. "He's just an old friend of Dad's. He'll sit in the corner and leave as soon as we get the signatures." Megan let out a long, dramatic sigh of suffering. "Wonderful. The smell of old people is overwhelming enough with just one in the room. Let's hurry this up." I felt the heat rise in my chest, my fists clenching. I looked at Takus, expecting him to be humiliated. Instead, he walked calmly to the corner of the room, sat down in a leather armchair, rested his chin on the silver handle of his cane, and observed the room like a hawk perched in a tree. "Sit down, Leonard," Megan commanded, pointing to a chair opposite her. "Let's get this over with. I have a spa appointment at 2. I sat down. The leather of the chair, cold and uncomfortable. I felt small in the massive boardroom, while Connor stood behind Megan like a bodyguard. "Here is the situation, Dad," Connor said, sliding the papers toward me. "As we discussed on the phone, your health is declining. You are 72, and living alone in that big row house in Queens is no longer safe." "My health is perfectly fine, Connor," I said. "I still lift weights in the basement, and I walk 5 miles every morning." "I don't need any help. Your mental health, Dad," Connor corrected smoothly, his voice dropping into a fake tone of concern. "You are forgetting things. You are getting confused, and living alone is irresponsible. We are simply worried about your safety. You want the house," I said, cutting straight through his corporate jargon. Megan leaned forward, her eyes cold. "We want to protect the family asset, Leonard. The Queen's real estate market is volatile. If we transfer the deed to our names now, we can leverage the equity to invest in your future medical care." "For my care?" I repeated, looking at her. "Or to pay for that new Mercedes I saw in your driveway last week? Or that vacation to the Maldives you posted on Facebook? You tell me you are broke, you tell me you need help, and yet you live like royalty. And now you want my house. The house Patricia and I bought in 1980, the one we paid off by working double shifts for 30 years. It is called maximizing capital, Leonard." Megan spat, her voice dripping with condescension. Something you wouldn't understand with your simple high school diploma and your blue-collar career. Connor, explain the reality to him. Connor rubbed his temples, his face showing the intense strain of his desperation. Dad, look, Connor said, dropping the polite act completely. I have serious, life-threatening debts. I made some incredibly bad, highly leveraged investments in a cryptocurrency pump-and-dump scheme called Apex Coin on margin, borrowing millions from offshore brokers. When the coin collapsed to zero in a single afternoon, my margin accounts were wiped out, and I was left owing $400,000 to an offshore's sports gambling and lending syndicate operating out of Macau. They aren't normal bankers, Dad. They are ruthless enforcers, and they have already sent two of their local thugs, a muscle-bound guy named Tony and another named Chen, to follow me to my office building and my home. They cornered me in the dark corner of the parking garage in White Plains last Monday night as I was walking to my car. Tony blocked my path, showing me a high-resolution photo of Megan walking our dog in the park, while Chen stepped up behind me, pushing a cold blade of a pocket knife against my lower ribs, whispering that if the first cash installment of $50,000 wasn't delivered by Friday night, they would start by harvesting my fingers, and then they would pay a personal visit to Megan's family home on Long Island. If I don't come up with liquidity by the end of the week, my career, my marriage, and my life are over. He stopped, glancing nervously at Atakus in the corner. But Atakus remained completely silent, simply watching. So you are in trouble, I said quietly, and instead of asking for help, you try to trick me. You try to tell me I am senile. We are not tricking you, Connor shouted, slamming his hand onto the mahogany table, his face turning red. We are saving you, because if you don't sign these papers, Dad, I swear to God I will file the paperwork to have you declared legally incompetent. I have a doctor on our payroll who will testify that you cannot tie your own shoes or remember your name. I will put you in the cheapest state-run nursing home. I can find a place where the nurses steal your belongings and the food tastes like sawdust, and I will sell the house anyway. The room went silent, the hum of the air conditioning the only sound. I looked at my son, the boy I had taught to ride a bike, the one I had held when he scraped his knees, the one I had worked endless hours of overtime for so he could go to law school. He was gone. In his place stood a monster in a custom suit. You would actually do that to your own father? I whispered. I will do whatever is necessary to survive, Connor hissed. Sign the papers now. I looked at the documents on the table. Transfer of deed, power of attorney, revocable trust. It was a death warrant for my independence. From the corner, Atakus cleared his throat. The sound was loud and sharp in the tense room. Is this standard practice at this firm? Atakus asked, his voice mild and calm. Coercing elderly parents, threatening them with fraudulent medical diagnoses to seize their assets. Megan spun around in her chair, her face contorted with anger. Shut up, old man. One more word out of you and I will personally have security drag you out of this building by your hair. Atakus offered a small, cold smile. You mentioned you are a partner here, young man, he asked, looking at Connor. I am a senior associate, Connor corrected, puffing out his chest. And I am next in line for junior partner. When the old fossil who owns this place finally kicks the bucket, I will be running this entire division. The old fossil? Atakus mused. You mean Mr. Hale? That dinosaur? Megan laughed, her voice cruel. He hasn't been seen in the office in 5 years. He is probably drooling in some mansion in Connecticut while we do the actual work. We are the future of this firm, not him, so shut up. Atakus stood up slowly. He didn't look frail anymore. His posture was straight, and his eyes were cold as steel. Interesting, Atakus said. Very interesting. Connor turned back to me, ignoring the old man. Pen, sign now, Dad. I picked up the gold pen. My hand was shaking with a rage so hot it felt like fire in my veins. I looked at the signature line. If I signed this, I was homeless. If I didn't, my son would destroy me legally. He knew the system. I was just a retired electrician. I can't do it, I said. Dropping the pen, it clattered loudly against the mahogany table. What do you mean you can't? Connor's face turned purple, his fists clenching. I mean no. I standing up and looking him in the eye. I am not signing. You want the house. You try to take it, but I am not giving it to you. Not today, not ever. Connor lunged across the table, grabbing my lapels. You selfish old bastard. You have nothing without me. I let you live in that house. You don't let me do anything. I roared, shoving him back with the strength of 40 years of manual labor. He stumbled back, hitting the chair. Security. Megan screamed, slamming her finger onto the intercom button. Get security to the boardroom immediately. We have a hostile situation. The double doors burst open, and 2 large security guards, the same ones from the lobby, rushed in. Get them out, Connor yelled, pointing at me and Atakus. Throw them on the street, and Dad, don't think about going back to Queens. I changed the locks on your house this morning while you were on the bus. I froze, the blood running cold in my veins. You did what? The locks are changed, Connor sneered, fixing his tie. Your key won't work. You are homeless until you sign those papers, so take a walk. Think about how cold the streets get at night. And when you are ready to be reasonable, call me. The guards grabbed my arms, pulling me back. I struggled, but they were young, strong, and professional. They grabbed at Atakus too, handling him roughly by his gray coat collar. Easy, Atakus said, his voice dropping into a tone of chilling authority. Watch the coat. They dragged us out of the boardroom, down the elevator, and threw us out of the revolving doors onto the sidewalk like garbage. I stumbled, landing on my knees on the concrete. Atakus managed to stay upright, leaning heavily on his wooden cane. It began to rain, a cold, gray New York drizzle that turned the pavement black. I sat there on the wet ground, feeling the moisture seep through my clothes. I was 67 years old, my wife was dead, my son was a monster, and I was locked out of my own home. I have nowhere to go, I muttered, looking at the wet pavement. Atakus stepped in front of me, blocking the rain with his long coat. He extended a hand, his grip firm. Get up, Leonard, he said. What is the point? I asked, looking up at him. He won, he has the lawyers, he has the money, and I am just an old electrician on the sidewalk. Atakus offered a cold, sharp smile, and that is exactly where he made his mistake. He thinks you are just an old man. He thinks I am just an old beggar. Just then, a sleek black Rolls-Royce Phantom with tinted windows pulled up to the curb, its engine purring in near silence. The driver hopped out, holding a large umbrella, and rushed over to us. Mr. Hale, the driver said, opening the rear door. I was worried when you didn't call. Atakus handed the driver his cane. I was conducting field research. Jenkins, it was highly illuminating. Atakus looked at me, a warm expression returning to his eyes. Get in the car, Leonard. Let's get you out of the rain. I stared at the massive, luxurious vehicle, then back at the older man in the tattered coat. That is your car, a Rolls-Royce Phantom? It is, Atakus said, offering a small smile. But who on earth are you? I asked, standing up slowly from the wet pavement, my knees aching from the damp cold. Atakus turned around, pointing his silver-headed cane at the large, modern letters etched in stainless steel above the towering glass entrance of the skyscraper. The sign read, Hale and Partners. I am the dinosaur, Leonard, Atakus said, his eyes gleaming with a sudden, terrifying, and sharp intelligence that was completely hidden on the bus. I am the old fossil. I am Atakus Hale, the founding partner of this firm. And your arrogant son just declared war on the man who built this towers and signs his paychecks. He ushered me into the back of the car. The heavy door closed with a solid, satisfying thud, instantly shutting out the cold rain and the loud noise of the Manhattan traffic. The spacious interior smelled of rich leather, expensive polished walnut wood, and power. The wool carpet under my wet boots was thick and soft, and a glass partition separated us from the driver. Atakus pressed a button, and a small refrigerator door slid open, revealing a crystal decanter filled with amber single malt Scotch whiskey. He poured 2 generous glasses and handed one to me. We are going to my townhouse on the Upper East Side, Leonard, he said, settling back into the rich leather seat. We are going to get you a dry suit, a hot meal, and then, my friend, we are going to plan a funeral." "A funeral?" I asked, confused, holding the crystal glass. "Who died?" Atticus clinked his glass against mine with a soft chime. "Connor's career," he said, taking a sip. "Drink up tonight, we rewrite the future." I drank the whiskey. It was smooth, burning warm as it went down my throat, driving away the chill of the rain. "Tell me about your house in Queens, Leonard," Atticus said, looking at me with interest. "It's a 2-story brick row house in Astoria, Queens," I said, holding the crystal glass tightly, feeling the warmth of the whiskey spread through my chest. "It's nothing fancy compared to this luxury car or that massive glass office building. Just simple red brick, plaster walls, and oak wood floors. But every single corner of that house has a story. I remember the first night Patricia and I moved in, back in 1980. We didn't have enough money for furniture, so we slept on a sleeping bag on the living room floor, sharing a single paper plate of pizza and laughing about our future. I spent 3 summers building the back deck myself with cedar boards, measuring, sawing, and sanding the wood by hand after my regular 12-hour shifts at the construction sites. I painted the kitchen a warm, light yellow because Patricia loved the sun. And she said she wanted the kitchen to feel like summer, even in the middle of a New York winter. She planted the blue and purple hydrangeas out front, and she cared for them every single spring until her final days. Connor was raised in that house. He played in the backyard. He scraped his knees on the wooden stairs, and we hosted every Thanksgiving dinner at the small dining table in the kitchen. To my son, it's just a piece of old real estate, an asset to be liquidated for cash. But to me, it is the storage vault of my entire life's memories with Patricia. "It is my home. Does he know about your other assets?" Atticus asked casually. I paused, looking at him. "No, he thinks I live entirely on my union pension. He doesn't know about the 2 rental properties I own in New Jersey, or the union investment fund I managed. I never told him. I wanted him to make his own way in the world, to work hard for what he wanted, rather than just waiting for me to die." Atticus nodded slowly, a cold grin forming on his lips. "Good. Information is the best ammunition, Leonard, and right now, we have all the bullets. Jenkins, call the security team. I want them at Leonard's house in Astoria immediately. Open the doors, change the locks back, and secure any evidence of Connor's intrusion." The car glided through the rain, heading toward a massive, gated stone townhouse on the Upper East Side. The townhouse was a massive 5-story limestone fortress built in the late 19th century, standing behind heavy iron gates. Jenkins parked the car in the private courtyard, and we were escorted inside by a butler. The interior was magnificent polished oak floors, high ceilings with ornate plaster moldings, and walls lined with oil paintings of historical New York court trials and founding partners of the early legal guilds. Atticus led me into his private study, a massive room filled with thousands of leather-bound books, a roaring fireplace, and a large mahogany desk that looked like it had belonged to a president. We sat in front of the fire, drying off, as the butler brought us dry clothes and a hot meal of beef stew and fresh bread. "You know, Leonard," Atticus said, looking into the flames, "I founded Hale and Partners 40 years ago with nothing but a mechanical typewriter, a shared basement office, and a bad attitude toward corporate monopolies. I built it on respect, on fighting for the working-class unions, and on protecting the little guy from predatory corporations. What your son did in my boardroom yesterday, treating his own father like garbage, treating an older citizen like refuse, it is a moral rot. And in my experience, when a branch is rotten, you don't prune the leaves. You cut the entire branch off the tree." Atticus nodded slowly, a cold grin forming on his lips. "Good. Information is the best ammunition, Leonard. And right now we have all the bullets. Jenkins, call the security team. I want them at Leonard's house in Astoria immediately. Open the doors, change the locks back, and secure any evidence of Connor's intrusion." The car glided through the rain, heading toward a massive gated stone townhouse on the Upper East Side. The next 24 hours were a blur of intense activity inside Atticus's grand limestone townhouse. While I rested, Atakus's private security and legal teams were executing a calculated, relentless counterstrike. They had tracked down the corrupt physician Connor had hired, a disreputable psychiatrist named Dr. Marcus Thorne, who operated a failing private clinic in Brooklyn. Dr. Thorne had been paid a $10,000 kickback to sign a fraudulent psychiatric evaluation, declaring me mentally incompetent, without ever having met or examined me. Atakus's lead investigator, a retired NYPD detective, had confronted Dr. Thorne in his office that very afternoon, faced with the threat of immediate arrest for medical fraud, conspiracy, and the permanent loss of his medical license. Dr. Thorne had broken down completely. He signed a full confession, detail by detail, implicating Connor and Megan in the conspiracy, and handed over the emails and wire transfer records that proved their guilt. With that confession secured in our folders, the trap was ready. On Wednesday morning, a team of high-end tailors, professional barbers, and personal stylists arrived at 9 o'clock, sent by Atakus's private concierge. They worked on me for 3 hours, trimming and styling my gray hair, shaving my rough, wind-burned beard down to a neat, clean stubble, and taking precise measurements for a custom suit. They put me in a charcoal gray Italian wool, 3-piece suit that fit like a second skin, complete with a crisp white Egyptian cotton shirt and a dark silk tie. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in the guest's dressing room and stared at my reflection. I didn't see the tired, retired electrician in his faded flannel jacket and scuffed work boots anymore. The man looking back at me looked like a corporate titan, a man of immense wealth and consequence. The only other time I had worn a suit even remotely, this fine, was on my wedding day with Patricia, 40 years ago in a small church in Queens. "You look like a boardroom executioner, Leonard," Atakus said, walking in with a glass of sparkling water, dressed in a flawless velvet tuxedo. "I feel like an imposter in these clothes, Atakus," I muttered, my fingers adjusting the heavy silk knot of my tie. "I am a man who works with copper wire and steel conduit. I don't belong in a room full of millionaires." "You are not an imposter, Leonard," Atakus said, his voice dropping into a tone of quiet strength. "You spent 40 years building the infrastructure of this city. You built the foundations. They just decorated the rooms. You are the reality check they desperately need. Don't ever forget that." At exactly 6 o'clock in the evening, a massive black stretch limousine was waiting for us in the courtyard. We drove through the wet Manhattan streets toward the iconic Plaza Hotel. The rain was still falling, lashing against the tinted glass windows, reflecting the glittering lights of the theater district in bright ribbons of red and gold. The grand ballroom of the plaza was hosting the firm's annual partners' ball. As our car pulled up to the private rear entrance, I could see the main entrance blocked by crowds, paparazzi lining the red carpet, and flashbulbs popping in rapid succession as New York's legal and financial elite arrived. Atakus and I bypassed the main entrance, entering through a private backstage door. We stood behind the heavy velvet stage curtains, listening to the hum of the crowd and the clinking of champagne glasses. On the stage, the managing partner of the firm, a tall, slick-haired man in a tuxedo named Sterling Vance, was speaking into the microphone. "And we have had an absolute record-breaking year for Heir Partners," Sterling announced, his voice booming through the state-of-the-art wireless speakers, carrying an air of slick corporate triumph. "We have closed over $3 billion in corporate acquisitions, and our litigation division has secured historic victories that have defined the legal landscape of New York. This monumental success is due to the tireless, aggressive, and uncompromising efforts of our rising stars, the young associates who understand that in the modern legal world, there is absolutely no room for weakness, sentimentality, or outdated methods. They are the legal gladiators who fight to win at any cost, who know that the old way of practicing law, the slow, cautious model, is dead. And tonight, we are here to reward one such gladiator who has shown us what the future of this firm looks like. One senior associate in particular has shown absolute ruthless dedication to maximizing our client assets and streamlining our operational efficiency. He is a man who truly embodies the future of this firm. A man who knows how to cut away the old weight and focus on the ledger. Please join me in welcoming our newest junior partner, Mr. Connor Baxter. The ballroom erupted in enthusiastic applause. I peeked through the curtain. Connor was walking up the steps to the stage, wearing a smug, triumphant smile. At a VIP table near the front, Megan was beaming, holding a glass of champagne, looking as if she had already won the lottery. Connor took the microphone, smoothing his lapels. "Thank you, everyone," he said, his voice dripping with false humility. "It is a true honor. I have worked incredibly hard to get here, and I have had to make several difficult sacrifices along the way." Atakus nudged my shoulder. "That is our cue, Leonard." He signaled to the sound technician, standing at the soundboard, a technician who had been instructed by the founder himself. Suddenly, the microphone in Connor's hand went dead. The massive chandeliers flickered, and the ballroom was plunged into complete darkness. The crowd gasped in confusion. Then a single, bright spotlight cut through the blackness, hitting the side entrance of the stage. Atakus Heir walked out into the light, his wooden cane tapping rhythmically on the stage floor. The sound was loud, echoing through the silent room. A whisper ran through the partners like wildfire. Is that Atakus Heir?" The founder. Connor froze on stage, his mouth open, looking as if he were seeing a ghost. Atakus took a wireless microphone from his jacket pocket. "Good evening, everyone," he said, his voice carrying a booming natural authority. "Forgive the interruption, but I have a low tolerance for lies. They give me indigestion." He walked to the center of the stage, standing right next to Connor. Connor shrank back, his face turning pale. "You were speaking of sacrifices, Mr. Baxter," Atakus said, his blue eyes cold. "Tell us, what exactly did you sacrifice? Did you sacrifice your legal ethics? Did you sacrifice your integrity? Or did you sacrifice your own father?" Down at the front table, Megan stood up, so quickly she knocked over her chair. "Who is this old man?" she screamed, her voice shrill. "That is the beggar from the bus. Security, get him off the stage." Atakus pointed his cane directly at her. "Sit down, young lady, before I have you escorted out in handcuffs. And this time, I am not the one wearing the tattered coat." He turned back to the audience. "This senior associate," Atakus announced, gesturing to Connor, "threatened to declare his own father mentally incompetent to steal his home and cover his gambling debts. He even changed the locks on his father's house, locking him out in the cold. And when I stood beside his father in our lobby yesterday, he called me trash and ordered security to throw me onto the street." Atakus turned to the side of the stage. "Come out, Leonard." I stepped out into the bright spotlight, my charcoal suit catching the glare. I stood tall, my shoulders back, looking Connor dead in the eye. "Dad?" Connor whispered, his voice cracking through the dead microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," Atakus's voice boomed through the high-fidelity sound system of the grand ballroom, filled with a cold, absolute, and terrifying authority that instantly silenced the room. "Meet Leonard Baxter, a local 3-master electrician, a proud union man who spent 40 years of his life working in the dirt and the steel to build the very skyline of this city. And he is the father that this parasitic senior associate, Connor Baxter, tried to declare legally insane using a corrupt, paid-off doctor, all so he could steal his home and cover his gambling debts. But Connor did not stop at family betrayal. Yesterday afternoon, my private forensic accounting team conducted a full, unrestricted audit of Connor's legal ledger. We discovered that over the last 6 months, he has systematically siphoned over $350 from the escrow trust accounts of our major corporate clients, including Vanguard Logistics and Standard Steel, transferring the funds through shell companies in Delaware and Cayman Islands to pay off his offshore bookmakers in Macau and cover his margin calls on crypto exchanges. Connor had forged the signatures of 2 senior partners on the wire release forms, believing that because the transactions were relatively small compared to the client's multi-million-dollar balances, they would go unnoticed until he could win his money back. But he was wrong. Atakus had personally called the CEO of Vanguard Logistics, an old friend of his, last night, when the CEO, a man named Arthur Pendleton, who was a close personal friend and client of our firm for 30 years, heard that a junior associate had been siphoning his company's escrow funds to cover gambling debts. He was absolutely furious. Arthur demanded immediate criminal prosecution and insisted that we notify the federal authorities and the U.S. Attorney's Office. Immediately, he made it clear that if we did not handle this with complete transparency and arrest the thief tonight, Vanguard Logistics would pull all their business from Heir and Partners, a move that would cost our firm tens of millions of dollars in annual billing. Atakas had assured him that the firm would restore every single penny of the siphoned funds by morning, and that the culprit would be handed over to the FBI in front of the entire board of partners. This folder contains the complete forensic financial report of those illegal transactions, the forged wire release forms, the bank statements from the Cayman accounts, and the exact IP addresses used to authorize the siphons from the office computers. Sterling Vance, the managing partner, was in complete shock, his eyes darting between Connor and the documents on the table. He realized that his hand-picked junior partner candidate was not a rising legal star, but a desperate thief who had compromised the firm's escrow integrity. He knew that if these documents were released to the public or the Bar Association, Heir and Partners would face massive civil lawsuits and a devastating blow to their reputation. He looked at Connor with a mixture of rage and horror, realizing there was absolutely no way to cover this up. "That is a lie!" Connor screamed, his face completely pale as panic took over. He grabbed the edges of the podium, his knuckles white. "He is senile. My father has severe dementia. He doesn't know what he is saying. He is being manipulated by this old man. Sterling, call security. Get these people off the stage. They are disrupting the gala." "I know exactly what I am saying, Connor," I said, stepping forward to the microphone, my voice calm, steady, and clear through the massive ballroom speakers. "I know about the corrupt doctor you paid $10,000 to pre-sign a mental incompetence form. I know about the locksmith you hired to change the deadbolts on my house while I was on the bus. And more importantly, the Federal Bureau of Investigation knows about the escrow accounts you raided to pay off your offshore bookmakers in Macau. The transaction is closed, Connor." Just then, two men in dark suits stepped out from the wings of the stage. "Connor Baxter," one of the agents said, showing his badge. "You are under arrest for wire fraud, bank fraud, document forgery, and elder abuse." Connor collapsed to his knees right there on the polished hardwood stage, tears streaming down his face and sobbing loudly as the federal agents pulled his arms behind his back, clicking the cold steel handcuffs around his wrists. The ballroom crowd was dead silent, staring in horror at the scene. "Dad, please, tell them it's a mistake. You have to help me. They will lock me up forever. I am your only son, Dad, the boy you raised in Astoria. Please, say something." I looked down at him for a long, heavy, and silent moment, feeling the final links of my connection to him dissolve. My son, Connor, died the moment he decided his own father was just a transaction, a paycheck to be cashed and thrown into a state asylum, I said, my voice carrying a quiet, heavy finality that echoed through the silent ballroom. "The man standing in front of me is just a criminal wearing a custom suit. I hope you find the time in your cell to remember the honest trade I tried to teach you." They handcuffed him and dragged him off the stage. Across the ballroom, Megan tried to slip out the rear exit, but she was immediately blocked by bank security and two local police officers who arrested her as a co-conspirator. The cameras flashed blindingly as the scene unfolded. Atakas put a hand on my shoulder. "It is over, Len. The rot has been cut out. Connor lost everything in the fallout. His license to practice law in the state of New York was permanently stripped by the Bar Association, and he was subsequently sentenced to 10 years in a federal penitentiary for wire fraud and embezzlement. Megan filed for divorce 3 weeks into his prison sentence, taking whatever assets remained, leaving him completely bankrupt, disbarred, and alone in a prison cell. As for me, I returned to my brick row house in Astoria, Queens. The lock on my front door works perfectly now, and the blue and purple hydrangeas Patricia planted are still blooming beautifully out front every spring. But I am no longer just a retired electrician living off a modest union pension. Attacus Heir officially hired me as the chief infrastructure and electrical consultant for Heir and Partners' extensive commercial real estate renovations across Manhattan, paying me a handsome annual consulting fee that allows me to live comfortably and support my fellow retired union brothers. My first major project was overseeing the complete electrical and wiring restoration of the historic MetLife Tower and two major commercial complexes near Wall Street that the firm owned. I was in charge of coordinating the union teams, inspecting the high-voltage installations, and ensuring the work was done to the highest standard of craftsmanship. The local 3 union workers respected me because they knew I had spent 40 years in the trenches just like them, and I spent my weekends teaching young apprentices the details of the trade, showing them how to bend conduit and read complex electrical schematics. We still meet every single Tuesday morning, not in the wood-paneled executive offices or at the Plaza Hotel, but at the bus stop on Main Street. We board the Q44 bus together, 2 older men sitting in the priority seats, talking about the city's architecture and laughing, before heading to a small local diner in Astoria to get a hot cup of black coffee. Sometimes, the true foundation of a house isn't the concrete poured into the ground. It is the character, the respect, and the love of the people who built it.